What a wonderful introduction from Mayor Shivi. She's one of the most active and proactive mayors in the United States, and really she inspired us a lot about how Metaverse and AI can be used to improve the lives of citizens. So as Dr. Haas said, that was a wonderful introduction to our panel about artificial intelligence and the city. Before, I'm going to introduce each one of our great panelists, but before, I'm just going to throw at you some facts. It took to Netflix 3.5 years to reach 1 million users. It took to Twitter 2 years to reach 1 million users. It took Facebook 10 months to reach 1 million users. It took Spotify 5 months to reach 1 million users. And it took ChatGPT 5 days to reach 1 million users in November 2022. And now there are 100 million users of ChatGPT, and it's growing fast. Now, let's introduce our panelists. So, in the chair order, we have Yorke Rhodes III. He's the Director of Digital Transformation, Blockchain, Cloud Supply Chain at Microsoft. He's the founder of Blockchain Strategy at Microsoft and a fellow adjunct professor at NYU, teaching e-commerce and digital marketing. So we have a true expert about blockchain technology. Thank you, Yorke, for being with us. The second person is Mia Shah-Dand. She's the founder of Lighthouse 3, a woman in AI ethics organization. So we're going to have her very important analysis about ethics and women in tech. And we have Dele Atanda, a tech entrepreneur, the chair of the Internet Foundation, the CEO of MetaMe, the world's first self-sovereign AI and universal smart data marketplace. He's also a true metaverse expert. So thank you very much. We have a wonderful panel here. AI was jumped recently on the radar of the metaverse conversation. When the metaverse and the blockchain and NFT started to go into the mainstream in early 2021, we were not talking that much about AI. It was more in the background. It was a topic for really experts. And 2022 was the big breakout year with ChatGPT and the first beta version of ChatGPT. I first heard about the application of AI through artist friends who were beta testing AI and use of AI for generative art. And it was so new, it completely blew my mind to see the possible applications of artificial intelligence. And over the past months, AI is now one of the pillars of the metaverse. When we talk about the metaverse, there are many different definitions, but we all collectively agree that in the metaverse, we have the blockchain technology, we have the virtual reality technology, and now, and for a few months, AI is one of the major components because of the incredible possibilities of AI to improve and enrich the metaverse. And in particular, talking about AI and the cities, how can we use this technology to improve the life of residents of the city? How can we use AI to help mayors, to help elected officials to exercise their democratic mandate. They have been elected by citizens, by human beings, but maybe they can use the AI to better serve their residents. So we're going to have this a conversation right now. I would like to ask to every of our panelists to make a quick statement, a quick introduction about how do they feel AI can help mayors to better serve their residents.
Sure, thank you. And by the way, just a side point to your speed of adoption, there was an interesting moment in 2017 with one of the first cryptocurrency ICOs. I think in 90 minutes they raised $12 million. And so it was an example of just the speed of technology and something that is obviously where we are today, right? And what we have to think about, and we can certainly talk about a lot of risks associated with technology in general and how it morphs the social domain of human beings. From a city perspective, I think what we have to realize with AI is AI will be injected into everything that we do minimally as a co-pilot, right? And so that's a terminology that Microsoft likes to use. We actually have Visual Studio plugin for Copilot, which helps coders code more efficiently. It's an AI assistant. And so Copilot's a great word because it's not the pilot, right? It is the Copilot, right? It is guided by human beings. And it's guided by the data that human beings create. And I'm sure we'll go towards the ethical issues associated with that as well. But think about it as an accelerant for every function. And so it's hard to answer the one thing, right, that it will do, but as you think about the overlay of Web3 AI in the metaverse, in an ideal state, think about autonomous vehicles. You could certainly have autonomous agents inside of a metaverse that might be concierges for the city, for example, that can provide information for other people in the metaverse in the digital surrounding that's created for the city. There's just so many examples. I'll pass it over.
Hi, is this better? So thank you all so much for being here on a Friday afternoon. It's brilliant, and I'm so glad Dele invited me. I work at the intersection of technology and diversity and ethics. So ethics, people think diversity is the separate topic people talk about, and then ethics, right? There's like two separate things. But diversity, if you're not including people, it's unethical. It's intrinsically just unethical. So let's just get that out of the way. So I love the promise of technology. I've been in this space for a while. My last corporate gig was with Google. I worked inside of companies. I worked outside of companies. I help large organizations adopt technologies. So I'm past the hype stage. I'm already looking at, does this work for the organization? Does this work for the community? So I love this conversation we are having. So we can move past the hype. I'll look at, can this deliver real value and benefits to your constituency, which can be organizations, and here we're talking about cities and communities. So we looked at the promise, but let me start with the grounding in reality. So I have a question for you all. This is Friday. We'll probably keep a little interactive, if that's okay. I just have one question for you all. I moved from the Bay Area 2 years back, and I got rid of my car. I don't need a car anymore, which is liberating. So I have a question. Does everybody here have a car or at some point driven a car? Just, okay. So can you raise your hands if you have a car without seatbelts? Anybody? Okay. Anybody using stolen parts? I promise this is like a safe space. I'm sure we're not going to share this. But anybody has a stolen car, stolen parts? No?
Stolen car.
I'm not one for the brave enough to admit.
Stolen car, yeah.
Stolen car, stolen cars. Anybody use their car to kidnap people, hold somebody hostage? Okay. All the time? Okay. I need to know. Okay. Watch out for that one. Right over there. The reason I'm asking is when we look at technologies, it's so easy to get blown away by, oh my God, look at, isn't this amazing? Because we love that, right? It sounds promising. The vision is there. The future can be better. I believe in that because I'm sitting here talking to you about technology. But I also want to put a reality check that if you were to buy a car without seatbelt or without airbags, and you wouldn't consider not having the safety features, then why would you invest in this technology, which doesn't have safety features, that's not going to keep you safe, right? Why would you use, well, generative AI is one of those technologies that is amazing, brilliant, like people are using it, it's very popular, but let's also remember the data it's working off of is some of it, they don't have consent. They don't have consent to use that data. So we'll let the lawyers figure out the legality of this issue, but ethically we can all agree that we need to have people's permission before we use this, their content, their data, their assets, and that is pretty much where I come from, not as ethics as this nebulous thing, but something we all need to be keeping in our back of mind all the time.
Thank you. Could I briefly add something to your remarks? Could I?
Yes.
Because you mentioned the seatbelt. I don't know why I know this, but Volvo came up with the seatbelt. And they had patents, but they opened up the patents right after so that all car brands could have a decent seatbelt in place. And that's maybe a nice analogy for today and what we try to do around the metaverse, to not say, okay, we have something and we lock it in and you have to pay for it or whatever, but let's do this together. So thank you for the seatbelt, and let's learn from Volvo.
Thank you so much for sharing.
This is a non-branded commercial stuff.
You don't work for Volvo, right?
No.
Good. Just checking. But that's okay. I think it's wonderful that we're able to share that.
Yeah, great. It's very encouraging. We're all, I think probably everyone here, we're technologists. We're all very enthusiastic about the potential, excited about the future of what this technology can do. And I often find myself being, this voice of gloom and doom and despair and uncertainty and, concerns. It's really refreshing to actually have someone else.
I don't even invite you to talking very often, I have to admit. I'm like the killjoy. I walk in and it's like, okay, where's the exit?
But I hear you, and I do feel that on one hand, I focus a lot on data privacy, data ownership and data sovereignty and data control. But one of the things that I always try and espouse is that if you actually give people more control and sovereignty around their data, then you will get more data sharing. Because people will share data in a trusted manner with those that they want to, and you'll get better data, you'll get better outcomes. So, I say that because I think what we're saying in that regard, and what I believe, is that with the right safeguards in place, we can go faster. With seatbelts on, we can drive at 60, 70, if we're in Germany, 200 miles per hour, right? Because you've got the safety provisions around you. And so I think that's an important context to take to when we think about this. And I think to kind of come back to your question, Pierre, in terms of cities, I think that cities do occupy a very unique place in this discussion about the metaverse. Because the metaverse is a lot of things, and a lot of it is game, let's be honest, it's heavily dominated now by gameplay. That's, as you say, the game developers or website developers of the metaverse, effectively, right? And a lot of that's fictional, a lot of that's just fantasy world play and whatnot. And then, of course, you've got the big enterprises and doing the sort of enterprise, person-to-person workspace. But cities occupy this space that bridges the real world with this digital world in a very meaningful way. And it's very local in many regards as well. So geographically it's centered in a way that other metaverse experiences don't have to be. And as a result of that centeredness and that fusion of real world, digital world, the implications are much more acute. And I think that, there was a big debate earlier about the role of private enterprise and cities and all whatnot. And it is a very important balance to get right about how you enable innovation, but what are your obligations to citizens as well. So, in terms of what I think is the key thing for cities to figure out in that regard is, what What is your vision of your city of the future? And what is your obligation to all the stakeholders? And how do you then, what role do you play in creating an environment that can foster the progress of that vision according to that? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our panelists for these first introductions. I would like to start a dialogue with our panelists and also with the audience about 3 topics that are part of the main mission that the mayors have for their cities. The first topic is urban planning. How do you improve a neighborhood? How do you pick a particular part of a city to become a hub for tech, or to where are you going to build a hospital? Where are you going to create an art center? Which part of the city is going to be more focused on businesses or residential area? This is a very important task of every mayor, and maybe artificial intelligence can use the decision process. The second topic is art and culture, and Mayor Shivi told us that she believes, and I 100% agree with her, that art and culture is very important to bring people together, to create conversation, to bring also many tourists together, to bring businesses in arts and creative economy. And how can we use AI or generative AI arts to create more meaningful interactions between residents in a city? And the third topic I'd like to address is diversity, equity, inclusion in cities. AI, the metaverse, right now the early adopters tend to be people who went to college, who are mostly privileged economically, but we need to make sure that every single citizen, every resident of every city understand this technology and can use and can contribute. So the metaverse is truly representing every single community. And maybe schools in cities could be proactive and create classes about AI, about the metaverse, can teach children in high school, in middle school, how do you use ChatGPT? Maybe they could be after-school programs designed in cities to make sure everybody can have access to this technology. One of the first jobs I had, I worked for what we call in French a community of city, which is roughly the equivalent of a county. And it was 25 years ago, and I was working in the city of Rouen, which is west of Paris. And one of the missions I had to deal with were to create a new bus line and to create a new convention center. And we just had a lot of conversation. Where are we going to physically build this new convention center? How are we going to create this bus line? And we had no idea. We tried to compile information, and it was a complex task. I'm sure that now, using AI, we can do much, much better to serve our citizens. So let's start with the first topic, urban planning. How would you see the use of AI for urban planning?
Yeah, great question. And I think, when we think about urban planning, we think about top-down urban planning. And I just, having been in New York City since the early 80s, actually since way before that, but at NYU since the early 80s. If you think about the communities that have thrived over those years, they've changed, right? And that's a personal community choice. It's not so much top-down urban planning, because I don't think anyone decided, that the West Village is a great place for artists in the early 80s. The Soho is a great place for artists in the late 80s. Brooklyn, Williamsburg is a great place for artists, right? It's an economic, it's a community choice that actually is driven by consumer sentiment and consumer action. And I think that's a great place, actually, to use AI to derive that sentiment and derive that and help actually inform urban planning associated with that. Examples, I think top-down great examples are both New York City somewhat following the model of Paris around just making it more accessible to bicyclists and pedestrians than it is to cars, and fact, you probably know the numbers in Paris, but the percentage of car ownership is quite low. Right? And it goes down every time there's a new election. So it's a really interesting lens to look at how do you make your plan for communities that live in your city work for community and residents versus necessarily business, and that's certainly something I think we need to contend with now, given the nature of how people are working.
Thank you very much.
So, I've lived in 6 states in the United States, and what strikes me as being unique about New York in particular is the flexibility that we have, the infrastructure that you have. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, good. Okay, much better. Okay, thank you. I can hear myself. So, when we talk about infrastructure, I think it's critical when we look at like how easy is it to get around. For a lot of folks, accessibility is an issue. So if we are building experiences or if we're building communities which are inclusive, then we have to think about how can technology enable that. And we have data. It's not that we're drowning in data right now. There is no shortage of data. So if data is what's powering AI, then why are we not using that data? There's an opportunity there to identify the spots. Like, where are the gaps? So are we doing more, are we making a better mousetrap, or are we trying to enhance lives of people? So that's where I think what Dele said, what is the vision? Is the vision is to do more for people who already have more, who have access to services, or do we use this opportunity to deliver services to those who don't have some? The accessibility, we think of it as disabilities, but it can be socioeconomic inaccessibility, that people are not able to get to services, they can't access services. And if anything, I feel COVID was devastating, but what it allowed us to do is rethink how we approach solutioning. Not as a techno-solutionist viewpoint, but how does it help humans? Like, we always have the ability to work from home. The technology can change a lot, but it really has to be tied back to what does the community want, what's lacking right now, and how we can deliver that using the data that we have, using the infrastructure that we have to address those gaps.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think when you're building on both points, I think what AI gives us now from an urban planning position is, I'd say it's an opportunity, but you could also into another light and say that no room for excuses in terms of not asking questions. And that's what I think we have to force ourselves to do from urban planning now, and looking at communities and looking at journeys, and this is going to go holistic when quantum comes into play, but even in current computing models, you can now look at communities, journeys, and really plot them out at an individual level, at a community level, and look at multiple scenarios in terms of how people get around. I live in New Jersey, and it fascinates me. It's like, it's insane that you can get the ferry over, but there isn't a subway station by ferry. And you either have to get a bus to a subway station, or get a bicycle or something to just get to a subway, and that's insane. It's ludicrous, and it's that kind of connectivity. I remember years ago when I first came to New York, you couldn't get the subway to the airport. It was like, has anyone ever tried that? Yes. It's epic. For a world-class city, right? World-class city. These kind of issues are inexcusable when you come to urban planning in this context of AI now. You can do it at a macro level, you can do it at a micro level, you can imagine, different sort of types of citizens in terms of different worker classes and different day types, different scenarios, different times of day, what you can map all of that out. So I think AI gives us the opportunity to simulate these on a granular scale in great detail, to the extent that there's no longer an excuse for really bad planning around this.
you very much.
Thank you. I really believe that we learned something very important. AI is going to remove any excuses from mayors. And I think that's a beautiful metaphor. So thank you very much, Dele. I like this one. I might quote you on this. The second point I would like to ask our panelists their opinion is about the use of AI for arts and culture. Generative AI is a new form of digital art where artists are using artificial intelligence to enhance their creative vision. And for public art, it might be truly fascinating to use artificial intelligence to create digital artwork that are going to dialogue in real time with the community and with the audience. How would you see the use of AI to improve arts and cultural experience in cities?
That's a deep question. I think AI is obviously a tool, and this is a pretty, I think, controversial conversation about generative art and attribution of original works is part of that. Maybe we'll talk more about the ethics of provenance and AI and things like that. It's really important. In terms of innovation cycles where you're adding something that accelerates the work of creators, it's a natural evolution, and I think that's going to continue to happen. How we think about this in the context of autonomous agents and cities, I think, is an interesting, very interesting lens. Specifically around what you mentioned was really like having an interactive experience with artwork as part of that, which can be generative, right? The interactive experience doesn't have to be what the original artist thought of when they created that experience, because generative AI understands prompts, right? And can understand language and create new interactions of possibilities from that. So there's a huge landscape. There are things that you could do, to your point, like we have to think very carefully and ethically about what we should do or how we treat this technology.
So this conversation reminded me of a trip to Louvre. It was many, many years back, and I remember how they had a virtual experience which you could access, and this was some years back. And then it brought back again during COVID, where a lot of museums created these virtual experiences because you remember the COVID, right? Because I know we're trying to get past that. It did not happen. Let's like denial, like it's bad. Let's not talk about it. But I think there were so many lessons that we learned from those experiences. And one is that we can bring those experiences to us. We can be immersed in those no matter where we are. So I feel from an arts and culture perspective, there is value there where we can enhance the experiences. And again, I have mixed feelings about generative AI. Like any technology, it can be used for great and it can create amazing art, but also the way these models are developed with our consent. So there is a lot to be sorted out, but underlying principle remains the same, is that artists deserve recognition, and we need that. We need that in our lives. We need that enhanced something that connects us to a deeper human level. So if technology can enable us to do that, and I'm thinking of school children and kids who are socioeconomically not privileged. They can't go to Paris. They can't go to some of these museums. How cool would that be to bring those experiences to them right in their classrooms? So I feel like I stress the point about accessibility and looking beyond just people who have everything, who have access, to looking like who is being missed, who are we not thinking about, who are the people we can reach through these technologies.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and that's going to be the resounding issue for certainly the next decade, maybe longer. And that's perhaps a key metric, Metaverse performance index thing for us to track in terms of how quickly do we get accessibility, pervasive accessibility, into as wide a population, as inclusive a population of a city as possible. It's very quantified, very specific in that regard, as a measure, as a key metric for moving forward. And I like that as a metric because it's very, it's also very contained. You know, from a city perspective, you can track counts of hardware, software, Wi-Fi access, bang through. You can really, in a very tangible way, quantify the level of accessibility that's there. So I think that's going to be a foundational issue. But to be a bit more on the, I have a sparring partner that I can actually be a bit more free thinking in terms of the possibility of the space. I think in terms of art, and obviously attribution and appropriate remuneration to artists is key. It's kind of a Web3 principle. But I also think there's a really interesting opportunity in terms of interaction, particularly through generative AI, between the consumer and the art in itself, to create this more sort of dynamic, it's almost like a prosumer model, whereby the consumption of the art, the user, the citizen, if you will, as they interact with this art, probably, ideally, through some sort of autonomous, self-sovereign AI of their own, that gives them a degree of control and protection in terms of how they interact with these spaces. But where the art changes and the nature of that experience becomes tailored and very personal to the individual. You know, many artists will say, you know, this is the piece. I don't know what it's going to mean to you. You know, it's not for me to determine what it means to you. This is just, I'm the channel for this, and it can mean different things to different people. And I think that can become materialized in a very real, random, individualized, and bespoke way through generative AI in the future.
Thank you very much. I just want to add to that really quickly a couple of points. You sort of hit on this concept of this transition from traditional artwork to digital media had a very similar sort of provocative type of feeling, right? What is digital media? Is that real art, right? And this generative art and NFTs created by non-traditional artists has the same sort of lens. And I think this is just the innovation cycle, right? But all of this conversation actually rests upon a problem that we haven't solved in the United States or worldwide, and you're referring to this, which is access, right? The digital divide still in the United States is significant. And technologies, whether, you know, and this came really to fruition in the pandemic, and I know both NYU guidelines as well as others, when you have students who don't have a computer that's capable of rendering the video, right? That's typically an economic divide problem, right? And so all of these issues rest upon the assumption of digital access, right? And so everything that we're talking about, we have to solve digital divide issues. And we've had multiple administrations in the United States in the past couple of decades who have, you know, charged forward on the digital divide issues, even recent administrations doing that. And then worldwide as well. And I think worldwide, if you look broadly at the global numbers, mobile is actually helping substantially in that category. But yeah, we have a long way to go on some basic stuff too. So.
Thank you very much. Really, I want to thank our panelists because they already jumped into the third topic, because this topic seems to be so important that they already addressed it. And I indeed think this is a topic that we're not talking enough in the crypto community, is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we already started by the force and the importance of this topic to talk about. And yes, there are students or individuals who don't have a computer that can render the 3D graphic that might be necessary to have a full metaverse experience or to address to public services in the metaverse. We have the question of high-speed internet, 5G access, and also making sure that every children from middle school, high school learn about this technology. So I would like to ask you, what kind of public policy in terms of education at city level would you like to see implemented by the Department of Education of cities to make sure everyone, every children knows about AI and the metaverse?
I'll start with fiber to the schools and laptops, and then we can go into the next part of it from there.
40% of US households don't have access to high-speed internet. So that's the data point that I've been sitting with for a while and trying to figure out, like, how do we reach this folks? So that's a great point. I do believe that we need to expand our definition of what does inclusion mean. Because I feel like we talk about diversity as a check-off. Okay, how do we check the box on this race, this gender, but socioeconomic diversity is a huge one. Like people outside this room who can't get into certain buildings or can't get into certain services because they don't meet the threshold or they don't look a certain way. I believe in the promise of technology. I feel like we can overcome that. It's just again comes back to, like you said, what is the vision and what are we trying to achieve with this and what is the philosophy of whom do we want to include, whom do we want to exclude, because then these become political choices that we are making even without even realizing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we spoke about this a little bit yesterday. You know, I think you have to reframe the argument in many regards because it is choices. And you look at the pandemic and we spent billions and trillions. That into quite future in this come to think about it, right? And we knew that digital services were quintessential. We knew that the divide was extensive. We knew that there were going to be extensive mental health behind issues. And that was a missed opportunity to deploy a laptop to every student. To every student. Why? I don't see the justification for not. You know, we had the emergency, the emergency manufacturing bill. We could have easily done the same thing. It's a question of choices, and we have to see this as being critical. And bear in mind, you know, 40% of U.S. households, right? We're not talking about the rest of the world. We're not talking about Africa or Latin America. We're talking about the U.S. We're talking about that's here in New York, right? That's quite insane for the wealthiest country on earth to have those kind of numbers. And it's all about will. So I think we have to, and you know, what we were saying yesterday is that I believe that we have to frame this in an economic sense now, in order to speak the language of those who are in charge of policy making in that regard. You know, we're talking about how do we speak the language of the mayors, how do we present the metaverse in a language that mayors can understand. And I think we need to present this inclusion discussion in an economic framing that the policymakers can understand. This is causing us economic harm as a society. It's preventing us from being competitive on the global scale. It's preventing us from being a world leader. We will lose our world leading innovation space if we don't address this in this regard.
Just against our schedule here, I don't want to keep people longer than you're scheduled to stay, but I'd like to suggest, Pierre, if we can have like a couple questions about AI from the whole, and then move to kind of our kind of moving forward remarks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for our panelists. We address very important issues, and I wish other panels and other conversations like NFT NYC and all of the many crypto events that we all attend. I have not seen this depth of conversation that I see right now, and I see today and yesterday. So thank you to our panelists. And a round of applause to our panelists. So, do you have yes, first question.
This was a fantastic panel, but I have a question. It's not just a question with the digital divide about handing people their laptops. It's also about the underlying digital infrastructure in cities. And if we're talking about actually working with companies and mayors, doesn't it behoove us to think about the underlying fiber optics or whatever exists, right? I mean, that's part of the problem, right? I mean, certain neighborhoods have them and certain have less. So how do we, so that's a great question for mayors, right? To think about. So that was, I have 1,000 other questions, but I don't dare ask everyone of them now.
Thank you so much. Who wants to answer?
Dele, you said it perfectly, which is everything is a choice, right? So make the choice clear and make it a mandate and create incentives for private institutions that are aligned for fiber. As an example, would help solve the broadband access issue.
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. And, you know, where's all the fanfare about 5G, right? We're in the 5G era. Wasn't that what the promise was supposed to be? And all those auctions that were made, to your point, you could make it a very easy part of the bidding process, ensure that there's ubiquitous coverage for 5G. Of course, that's one of the conditions. Or at least have a roadmap to how you're going to roll that out.
If we made 5G a utility, would that take care of the problem?
Possibly. I mean, I know that there are huge complexities with utility legislation, but probably. I'm not well versed enough to be able to answer that, but I imagine so, yeah.
Just as an example, the city of Miami Beach actually used a taxpayer-funded fund, essentially it was left over from something else, to put in a wireless utility. This is when I was at IBM, I actually worked on the project, so that's why I know about it. But it was in behalf of the mayor. They spent a fund and they put in Wi-Fi access for the public over 100% of the 7 square miles of Miami Beach. And that was an example of essentially a public utility long before there were all these Wi-Fi hotspots. So it's a really interesting example of doing exactly that.
Thank you very much. So one last question. Yes.
Thank you very much. A fantastic panel. Thank you. The question to all of you is, what's the role of the universities? We are New York University. That is, we have the name of the city in our university name. And how do you see us, other than the obvious, teach those classes? Can you go a little bit deeper and explore and share with us what you think about what we could do, given the platform that we have in the city?
Thank you very much. Excellent question.
I was at Columbia yesterday, and we had a conversation about there are
yeah, maybe closer to your mouth.
okay. So I was at Columbia yesterday, and we talked about how generative AI and AI in general is disrupting careers. There are jobs and there are opportunities out there. It's shifting the shape of careers. So educators, like here and Columbia, they play a huge role in reframing these experiences so they work for the students, whether it's adopting new technologies, whether it is delivering instruction in formats that actually work for students. So I feel this is a unique inflection point that we have right now to change the dynamic of and reaching students who are not being reached right now. And there are ways to creatively think about it. And I feel like circumstances are forcing us in that way. Whether or not we step up to that opportunity is a different question. But if AI is an opportunity, this new role is an opportunity, universities should be leading the way in shaping that workforce of the future, whatever format that looks like. But I think it's promising, there is the potential, but whether or not universities choose to step up and what they decide to do at this critical point in our history is really up to you all.
Yeah, I think that universities should feel a responsibility, to your point, about educating the next everything, right? And so, particularly in the digital sphere, which is where all these technologies are operating, we are creating the thinkers of the next 5 to 10 years who will influence government, influence politics, influence companies. And so creating the foundation, which is a multidisciplinary foundation that stands up those graduates so that they actually can have the conversation about ethics, society, and digital together, and actually be well informed to go and debate on this topic with their internal folks, because they're going to be looked at, right? Anybody who comes out of digital marketing or e-commerce is immediately going to be asked the question, what do we do, right? And it doesn't matter that you're brand new in an agency or a company, that's the question those people will get because their demographics fit with that answer, right? They've used Roblox, they are 100% on the internet, they were born on the internet in the right societies, in the right conditions. And so we have a responsibility to do the right framing so that they can have the right conversation and so that they can be the innovators and push through the 95% of no's that they will hear to try to make change.
Yeah, and I would just add, aside from the obligation to educate and prepare the next generation, I think what NYU is doing actually is phenomenally well is framing the conversation. I think that's really critical at this juncture. I remember we did the first Metaverse boot camp. So many of the students there were like, Metaverse, yeah, do I take that seriously? Yeah. But then they came and then they saw it in a different context. And I think, having this conference with the, mayor's conference and having industry leaders come and talk about this really contextualizes the discussion, frames the conversation. And I think that that's not only critical to students and alumni, but to the city and to society more broadly and generally, to really look at these issues and hold society to hold society's feet to the fire, effectively, to have a proper discussion about these issues in the right way.
Thank you very much. I give the microphone to Dr. Haas.
I actually think that's a great frame for our, just thank you guys. That was